Very good. My name's Tim and I'm an alcoholic. And I'm just going to get straight into this. I've got 3 questions from the previous session. The first one is, you spoke about an interesting relationship with food. Do you seek help through other fellowships or manage it all? I love that phrase, manage it all through AA. If I went to a 12-step fellowship for every single problem I had, I'd be a very, very busy fellow indeed. Now, my history is a bit of a sort of mixed one. It's a bit of a mixed bag because the reason lots of 12-step fellowships exist is so that people who need the 12-step program but are not eligible for AA have somewhere to go and a rallying point of identification to surrender, and then there are minor differences in how the programs are worked. I'd say one thing about different programs and different, maybe I'm going to talk about this for the whole hour, different programs or different fellowships and different programs. Many years ago, I was in an Al-Anon meeting, and a very nice person was sharing, and she said, so step 5, share with someone else the exact nature of my wrongs. So that's all of the wrongs that other people did to me, and I shared the exact nature of those. Now that's, as the eagle-eyed of you will have realised, is the opposite of what step 5 is, where we're supposed to convey what our wrongs are. And if you read the forwards to the big book, they say a very interesting thing. Right here, maybe it says it here. That's an Al-Anon set of steps. Oh dear, no one knows. They're very good, but they're not what I'm specifically here for. It says, here are the steps we took which is suggested as a program of recovery. And it's got the 200 words of the steps on pages 58 to 59. And it looks like the steps are just, step 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, our lives have become unmanageable. That's the end of step 1. And of course it's not. If you read the forwards, it says that the 12 steps summarise our program. So imagine if you had a recipe book, and all you had was the contents page, quiche Lorraine. And let's say you wanted to make a batch of quiches Lorraine, you wouldn't be any further forward simply with the phrase quiche Lorraine. If you'd had one, you might be able to do an approximation of it. If you knew how to make short crust pastry, you could probably cobble something together, and hopefully it wouldn't be too runny. But it wouldn't be an authentic quiche Lorraine. Then Black Forest Gatto, where do you start? 7-layer cake. 7 layers of what? You're no further. Now, if you told a dozen people make a 7-layer cake, they'd all produce something different. If you gave them the same precise recipe from the Larousse, you'd end up with 7 or a bunch of very, very different, very, very similar cakes, rather. So this summary of the steps on pages 58 or 59 and 60, it is, rather, it's just the title of the step. It's not the content. The content of step 12 is like 5 chapters of the big book. 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 5 chapters is step 12. And that's just the beginning of step 12. You don't even get near it by saying, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. That's a clue as to what it is, but it's not the step. And the thing about Al-Anon, one of the difficulties in Al-Anon is what we'll say at the beginning of the deal of an Al-Anon meeting is we work the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then what happened, I think it was in the 1960s, there was I may be wrong on the date, there was a conference decision to exclude the big book from the Al-Anon conference-approved literature. So now Al-Anon is trying to work the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, but is blinding its members to what those 12 steps are. because the thing which tells them what the 12 steps are is now no longer conference-approved literature. And Al-Anon is so at risk of being flooded by people from other fellowships. Quite rightly, what we say is leave your other fellowships at the door. We don't even want to know if you belong to another fellowship. Not interested. And you don't mention non-conference approved literature in Al-Anon. But it leaves you with a problem, which means there's so much confusion in Al-Anon about what some of the steps even are. Ditto traditions, ditto concepts. So the point is that programme is the contents of this little book up to page 164, and you've got an aid memoir on 59 and 60. Now, the reason I say that is because when I've got a problem with food, when I have an interesting relationship with food or an interesting relationship with sex, I don't need to run off to another fellowship immediately or automatically, as though the God of AA is going to say, sorry, above my pay grade. It's not above God's pay grade. In step 12, it says we practice these principles in all our affairs, and that includes quite literally all of them. Now, there's a marvellous... So how I've dealt with the food situation... So on page 69, in this way we try to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? We asked God to mould our ideals and help us live up to them. And then it says, whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. I'll go back into this line by line in a moment. We must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. Now, at no point has it said in the book up to this point, this is what you do with a problem. It tells you what you do about problems in the area of sex and says, oh, by the way, that happens to be how you deal with any problem. So by the time you're 6 pages into the programme, because the programme really starts on page 63, that's the first action you take. And that's the first time you're signing on the dotted line and then having to fulfil your side of the contract. 6 pages in, it's got a solution for all human problems under any circumstances. Now, what it also says, supposing we fall short of the chosen ideal and eat a cake, does this mean we're going to get drunk? Some people tell us so, but this is only a half-truth. It depends on us and on our motives. If we're sorry for what we have done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will have been forgiven and have learned our lesson. If we're not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we're quite sure to drink. We're not theorising. These are the facts of our experience. Now, the one exception to this general principle of just work the steps I've already got with the higher power and the sponsor I've already got, the one major exception I found is, in fact, Al-Anon, because AA is really great, but it doesn't really touch the sides. It's not really designed to deal with that infernal entanglement with other people who are very, very unwell. There's some great stuff in Chapter 7, on maintaining boundaries. There's some great stuff in chapters 8 and 9 on maintaining boundaries. But I tell you, there's nothing like going to an Al-Anon meeting and seeing all of the acting out and thinking, oh my God, I've done every single thing that I observe in this room. There's nothing like sponsoring people in Al-Anon to learn how to maintain boundaries with very tricky people. Alcoholics are really straightforward. Just basically, they are selfish and they don't care about you. It's fine. Clancy says this. They're not doing it at you. You just happen to be in their way. Just maybe, as someone said, maybe don't lie down in front of steamrollers and you won't get run over by steamrollers. Get really good at spotting one coming and then jumping to the left or to the... But you can't do anything about the steamroller. The steamroller doesn't care what it's rolling over. It really doesn't. And it's just going to roll and you're going to be squashed and that's the end of it. with the Al-Anon side of things. And this actually goes into the question, what's the greatest gift Al-Anon has given you? I grew up in a household seriously affected by addiction / alcoholism, a little bit of everything, and Al-Anonism. So going back several generations, I think of the 8 great-grandparents, if my maths is right, 4 were alcoholic, and maybe 5, we're not entirely sure. It's difficult to ask them now. But you have one alcoholic, everyone else acquires Al-Anonism, and then the Al-Anonism gets passed down even though there is no alcoholic left there, because that's just how we deal with things. We just get inside other people's business and interfere and manipulate. And one of the really typical things, I'll show 2 examples of what I've learnt in Al-Anon. The first one, as an Al-Anon alcoholic growing up in an Al-Anon addict family, what one learns, one of the games that gets played is, don't trust what I say, you have to guess what I'm thinking, and if you can't guess what I'm thinking, it means you don't love me enough. So I'm just going to get angrier and angrier until you figure it out and then fix the thing that you did which pissed me off. That's one of the games. I remember once my poor old long-suffering father, they got on really well in the end, but I mean, that ability to get on took years for them to acquire. One day, my father and I went into the local town, and when we got back, someone wasn't talking to either of us. And I think it was a day and a half before we worked out why. And she believed that we'd gone into town without her on purpose because we wanted to spite her for reasons known only to ourselves. We finally figured it out. What's wrong? Nothing. She's French. There's nothing wrong. But she wasn't talking to us. I remember another time we turned up for Christmas, and clearly something was up. And we went and me and my then other half went and sat in the living room. And my mother stormed in, the door banged against the wall, hit her on the way back. And then she marched straight towards the Christmas tree and started taking baubles off the Christmas tree. And we said, what's going on? She said, Christmas is cancelled. Now, we managed to, again, get behind that. But the way we operated was to guess what was going on. Whatever was said, it was assumed that is simply not what is meant. So we can simply just basically, straight out of the trap, disregard what anyone is saying because everyone is lying. When I said what happened to my brother, my family said, oh, he had a heart attack. He was like 30 or something. I knew he had not had a heart attack. I saw in a dream a number of years later how he had died. I eventually asked them, and they said, yes, that it was suicide in a particular way. And I asked, is that how he died? And they eventually said, yes, that's how he died. So the deal was everyone lies about everything. To navigate this situation, you have to guess. And I've had a situation years ago where someone asked me to sponsor them. I gave them instruction. They repeated back the instruction to me and said, can I just check, is that what you're asking me to do? I'm like, well, those are the words that I said. And I said, honestly, it's best that you find someone you trust, because I can't even begin to process that. First out of the trap, being treated like I'm lying because I'm just using words, and someone trying to figure out what's the secret message behind the words. Incredibly common in interactions with Al-Anons. And I learned how to deal with that in Al-Anon, which is to say, I'm not going to play this game. If you're going to treat me as someone who is holding back secret messages, no, I can't do this. And then dealing with other people's disappointments, dealing with other people's manipulations, the contradiction, the argument. What Al-Anon has taught me is I don't need to engage. I don't need to fix it. I don't need to get anyone well. I can just leave someone else to sort that out. And you can tell, I can tell. Sometimes I'll get a text or a phone call and my blood starts to run backwards and I go into panic and I don't know how to respond, because however you respond, if you ignore them, you're now the bad person because you're ignoring them. Or if you respond to them symmetrically, then you're now playing the game that they've set you up to play. And I don't want to play the game, I don't want to. So what do? Al-Anon has taught me how to get out of those situations without touching the material at all, and that is so valuable. Whenever my body tenses up in an interaction, I know an old game has been activated, and I've learnt in Al-Anon not to respond until I've said to God, okay, you're going to have to give me a response here, which enables me to, to not play the game, but deal with the situation. And sometimes the moves in the game are so complicated and subtle and covered with layers of niceness and little emojis, just to smooth the passage, just to set up the game in this kind of quasi-friendly way. It's not friendly, it's full of aggression. I've learned to pause, say to God, what do I reply? And sometimes it's a day, sometimes it's a week, sometimes I never get an answer and I just leave it. And the ability to not engage, what a relief. And if they're disappointed, that's okay. I had, work situation. I work for lots of different agencies. Some are amazing and super professional, and others are misery factories. And what I've discovered is, with the agencies that are misery factories, if there's one interaction which goes wrong, probably the whole organisation is corrupted psychologically, and there is no way of interacting with this agency without getting my fingers horribly burned. And again, I've learned to just drop the communications completely. Even if you say, I'm not going to interact, that itself is an interaction. And it gets maligned as ghosting. It's not ghosting. Ghosting is when you pretend that you're dead and family members. That's where that whole thing comes from. It's a very dramatic situation. Actual ghosting, very rare. That's not ghosting, that's ignoring really inappropriate behaviour. And ignoring really inappropriate behaviour is the right thing to do, because you can't fix it. And so I couldn't have done that without Al-Anon. Whenever one of those games started up, I was immediately hooked in, but it took a long time in Al-Anon. One of the other things, I learn about me in Al-Anon not by doing my own inventory. I can't see a damn thing when I'm doing my own inventory. Nothing. It's boring, it's banal, it touches 1%. As I say, I go to an Al-Anon meeting, I see everyone else acting, I think, I do that, I do that, I do that, I do that. I'll give you some examples. Something as simple as the host of the meeting. You know how in Al-Anon, those of you who go to Al-Anon, when you go to Al-Anon, there are so many readings. It's like, let's say the meeting starts at 7, it's 7:25 before there's any sharing, because you have to read the these and you have to read the those, and then you have to read the others, and then you have to go back and reread the first things because someone forgot that they've been read, so they get read again, and then they don't want to interrupt the person who's now reading them in case they feel bad about themselves and not heard. So you have to hear the whole... I've heard the traditions twice because they were accidentally asked for twice and no one wanted to say anything. I was just so frightened that someone else might be upset. So 25 minutes of readings. There are a lot of readings. Now, what often happens, in AA, like, let's say the meeting starts at 7. At 6:45, you go in hoping you're going to get a reading. All the readings are already doled out, and the secretary's just sitting there, filing their nails. Al-Anon, no. There's this collective terror. If you're organised and dole out the readings in advance, then everyone's going to think you're really controlling. So what you have to do is wait till the meeting has actually started before realising, apparently, that there are readings. Then you say, can anyone read this or can anyone read that? Now, what happens next is amazing. People volunteer to read when they don't know what it is that is going to be read and they don't have a copy of the thing that is going to be read. They say, so they put the hand up and then the host says, oh, Sally, could you read? What do you want me to read? Oh, I haven't got that. I've got the wrong version. I've got the old version. And you think you're reading from Survival to Recovery, and they're trying to read from Pathways to Recovery or something. And I've heard literally this. Someone saying, I'll read the traditions, and then someone else coming in and saying, if Sally doesn't want to read the traditions, I'm happy to, because I know she read the traditions the other day. So what they thought was, Sally's only volunteered because she feels guilty and she's worried that the service won't get done. So she's volunteered, and I've recognised that she's volunteered twice recently. So her need is not to do this. So I'm going to save her from the fact that she has volunteered by volunteering myself. And then people when there's confusion, not wanting to resolve the confusion and just making a decision and go with it, just in case they're accused of being controlling. And every single one of these things that I can spot in the meeting, I do in altered forms in different situations. It's the most amazing mirror. And I can't get it in AA. I have to go to Al-Anon. When I do plenty of Al-Anon, read the Al-Anon readings, I am then sensitised to my own Al-Anon slips. I'm much less likely to have them. So I think lots of the Al-Anon stuff is covered in AA, but if you got it really bad, maybe 100,000 Al-Anon meetings will help. Now, with the food stuff, I don't go to OA. I apply the pages 69 to 70 stuff, and when I first started to deal with the food stuff, it was very slow, and that's okay. It's okay for things to take a long time. It's the sincerity of moving towards the moving towards the ideal. And one thing I'd say about the food stuff, sex, romance, blah blah blah, there might have to be a period of really keeping it real, shutting everything down, being monastic about sex or food and being super, super, super strict. But then you have to start living in the world as well. So when I spend a lot of time in Texas and Oklahoma and the middle lower states, and there ain't so much vegetarian food there, and they won't have the almond milk. And I kind of got sick of having to have taco salads without the taco, and then without the cheese, and you're just left with iceberg lettuce. I can't live for 2 weeks. So and Bill W. talks about this in the big book, about don't withdraw from the world. So in the initial stage of dealing with sex and food, just shut the whole thing down, get a jigsaw puzzle, get a hobby. But then learning to re-engage with the world, but not go crazy. And that just takes a lot of time. Now, if the problem is food or sex, you probably know people in AA that eat and have sex, maybe not at the same time, but one or the other or both in the same week. So finding other people who have similar problems in AA is not difficult. Finding other people who have similar problems who found a solution and are not co-signing each other's bullshit and saying, everything is normal as long as I'm not drinking, that's much harder. But they're there. And if you can't find those, rush off to whatever, anonymous. The one big exception to this is when I've had sponsees with like super active sex addiction. And sex addiction really is a chemical addiction, but you're just producing the Adderall in your own brain just by thinking certain things. Gaming addiction as well. Which presents, in my experience, almost the same as sex addiction in terms of the behaviours, the childishness, the irresponsibility. It's interesting how sometimes you think it's sex addiction and then you discover that it's actually gaming addiction. There's no sex happening, but it's weird because they're presenting just like all the sex addict people you know. So with those, when I'm sponsoring people with certain things who are in early stages, if they just try and do AA and they don't go to an S fellowship for the sex stuff, they're just not going to stop the behaviour, and then they can't stay sober because everything is lumped in together. So honestly, I don't think there is an answer. Some people do everything one-stop shop. Some people do a billion different fellowships and totally need to. I've needed to work out what I need to do other fellowships for, and basically AA and Al-Anon, and that's it. But I talk about food and the sex stuff and rights with lots of sponsees because almost all of them have got problems in those areas. The other thing about Al-Anon, I've been kind of hard on Al-Anon, but I think the book One Day at a Time in Al-Anon is the most amazing piece of recovery literature side by side with the big book. And studying that on a daily basis, there are literally several hundred lines in there, which if you just practice that could be your whole program. That would solve your whole problem. What it gives me the ability to do is to be adjacent to real craziness. And over time, what I've learned is there's a finite number of types of craziness, types of crazy first move in crazy games. Like every crazy game in interactions with other people has got a sequence of set moves, and there's a finite number of games, and eventually you run out and you realise, oh my God, everything that's is coming my way, I've seen it before. I know how to deal with this. I know how to deal with that. And you know how to deal with all of these. And then you go out there in the world where people are playing the same crazy games, and you just know how to deal with stuff. And I got that in Al-Anon. I got that from One Day at a Time in Al-Anon and Father Tom W. Listen to everything that he has said, every word that has ever come out of his mouth 4 times. For about 5 years, the tapes of his stuff were basically my whole program. They made me understand why my whole body would tense up when I met certain people. And I got behind that. I often hear people sharing negatively about therapy outside help. I find this disturbing. How should I respond? My ex's mother would say it wouldn't do for us all to be the same. So when other people share something and I find it disturbing, there are 2 things going on. How do I respond? I say, thank you for sharing. That's the end of it. But if I'm disturbed by anything that anyone else says, there's something interesting going on in me, and it's not about them. Very often when I'm upset at what other people say, it is because of my intolerance of, I just don't like people thinking different things than me. So I've had to learn that other people do things differently. That's fine. They're not wrong. It's not that they're wrong and I'm right or they're right. We don't have to work out who's wrong and right. I do what I do, you do what you do. That's the end of it. And then in tradition 1, unity means non-uniformity. Tradition 3, no conformity. So in AA, I get to sit listening to things that I find disagreeable or simply disagree with, and then other people get to do the same with me. So it's delicious. It works both ways. And to be able to just go out for dinner with people afterwards and act like a regular mensch and not shun people or find ways to exclude them from the meeting or try to shut them down or control the sharing or have long lists of things that you are and aren't allowed to say in sharing. Just let people... Brian was brilliant on this. He said in AA, what you want to do is build a really strong fence, like a paddock in which wild horses are tamed. If you've got a strong fence, meeting starts on time, ends on time, everyone knows what they're doing. People have prepared the script, so when they read the script, everyone knows there is someone confident and in charge at the front of the room who can be trusted to run the meeting. So everyone can stop monitoring what they're doing because they're trusting what is going on. Strong fence. And then you can fucking lose it in a safe environment, in an environment where you feel the grown-ups have got this. So you can have your little breakdown in the room and it's fine. If you don't trust that the room is well looked after, you can't break down. And so I've got to be able to break down in AA and let other people break down. And I was allowed to go through so many disagreeable phases, disagreeable to other people. I probably still am. And that means I get to let other people grow through the 47 phases or the 196 phases and be patient while they talk about those phases. So just because I've got to a particular point doesn't mean everyone else has to have got there as well. They're going to get there on their own time or not, and it's fine. And there's always another meeting. But also, here's the interesting thing. I often hear people sharing negatively about therapy outside out. Maybe they had a negative experience. Same with religion. I mean, I'm religious, but I get that people have negative experiences. That's fine. People are allowed to have had that. Are there times where it is appropriate to commit to Al-Anon before completing the 12 steps in AA? Okay, you don't need to tell your AA sponsor you're going to Al-Anon. You just look it up and go. They're separate fellowships. So if you're drawn to going to Al-Anon, you don't need to wait. One thing, as Tom Weston says, though, which is very good, is wait till you really, really need to, because otherwise it'll annoy the hell out of you. So wait until you're completely desperate, and then it'll start to make sense. Because Al-Anon is a very strange thing. In AA, people are like, solution, solution, solution in some meetings. Al-Anon, not so much. People just sort of talk. And it's hard to work out what's going on. But you feel like you've got more room to breathe at the end of it, which is what I like about it. I love this. This is so great. How do I identify when someone is trying to ask for help? Can it be implicit? A drug dealer never tried to second guess what I was thinking. I'm more of an alcoholic than a drug addict, but my understanding, what I've heard, is when people want drugs, they'll go and get drugs. They don't wait to be invited. Do you know what I mean? When is someone asking for help? When they say, "Can you help me, please?" If they're too frightened to ask, how bad can that alcoholism be? And maybe I'm not the right person. Find someone you're not frightened of. So what now? On the other hand, if you've got people who are super new, they've been in AA for like 18 seconds and they don't know that it's their job to ask people for help. What you can do, you can lay out a bit of a welcome mat and say, hey, if you have any questions about AA, would like to find out what alcoholism is and what we do about it in AA, you can call me. Here's my number. If you send me a message, I'll have yours. And if I'm going to a meeting later on this week, I'll invite you, and maybe you can come along and experience some different meetings. So you can lay out a welcome mat and then get them to take the initiative to take you up on it. So you're removing any sense that they might be intruding, or you have to let people know what is appropriate and inappropriate in terms of asking for help, because they won't know that. But that kind of, that I think what this question is about is, when people are kind of dancing around you and they sort of want to ask you a question, just wait till it's bad enough. And then it'll just... I've been at a meeting where I see someone I want help from, and I knock over chairs to get to them. I push other people out of the way and interrupt conversations. These are people who interrupt conversations in their outside lives. It's not shyness. Something else going on there. Don't fall for that shit. That whole newcomers are these like pathetic little creatures that if they hear something they don't like, they will run away from AA and die of alcoholism. I just don't believe it. You hear the step 5 of the person who is purported to be this little flower. I'm like, Jesus, I thought my step 5 was bad. You did what? And as someone said, they survived the crack houses of Hackney. I'm sure they can handle someone saying the word Jesus by accident in an AA meeting. It's literally not going to kill them. They will have heard a lot worse. They turn on the radio, they turn on the television, they sit on the bus. They will hear and see things which are 10 times as offensive as anything in AA. So when someone runs out of AA, because someone said that, don't believe it. I used to run out of AA saying that, and it wasn't true. It's because I didn't want the programme. What have we got here? No one has asked me to sponsor them for at least 8 months. Enjoy the break. I don't... because there'll come a point you're going to wish that was the case. I don't have sponsees anymore. How do I diagnose the problem? I think I'm doing what's suggested of spiritual unattractiveness. That's an amazingly good question. It presupposes that sponsorship has the name sponsorship attached to it, that to be a sponsor, you have to be called someone's sponsor by someone else who thinks you're their sponsor. In my first year, Doug was my actual sponsor, but Maureen was sponsoring me, and Sue was sponsoring me, and Elena was sponsoring me, and a couple of other people were sponsoring me. What does that mean? I would call them up and tell them my problems, and they would give me AA solutions. What is that but sponsorship? Sometimes the sponsor is the person that you have as the brass plate just to say to someone else, when they say, have you got a sponsor? You say, I've got a fucking sponsor. Thank you very much. It's him. They go, oh. But you don't go to him. You go to 6 other people, and that's where you're getting the good stuff from. So just because you're not formally sponsoring anyone doesn't mean you're not sponsoring. You can be sponsoring a lot of people in name, but literally not doing anything. Just going through the motions and nothing is really happening. So the title of sponsorship doesn't always correlate with whether or not you're sponsoring. The question is, are you talking to lots of people? If you're talking to lots of people, if you're interacting in different ways. And also, it talks in the book about intensive work with other alcoholics, not necessarily extensive work. If you go to the morning meeting, or in fact any meeting, where you know what the reading is in advance, you can spend the 24 hours before that meeting thinking about that reading and saying, if I get asked to share, what am I gonna say? You can prepare the shit out of it. You can prepare the content, you can prepare the delivery, and then 2 minutes share, 150 people, that's 300 minutes of sharing, which is 5 hours of message carrying done in 2 minutes, which you've spent prayerfully preparing for 24 hours. The impact is not proportionate to the time spent. The right individual comment at the right time will change someone's life. So it's about, you can be preparing by prayer, meditation, being quiet, minding your own business for a day, getting really still, getting in the zone, so that at just the right moment, you pop the little thought that's just occurred into someone's day, and then stop the conversation, leave the room. Often the most important thing you say is important because that is the point at which the conversation stopped. And if you carried on speaking after that point, it would be watered down with a whole load of other shit. I remember Chris, who was a sponsor of mine many years ago, I was explaining is a very bad thing to do to people. I was explaining why, because he needed the information apparently, I was explaining why I repeatedly would be in increasingly stressful jobs. And I said, I need to be in these like high-powered jobs because I get bored really easily and I need challenges or I just go to pieces. And he said, there are greater challenges in life than work. I've got to go, click. Now, I don't remember any other phone call from that year, but I remember that one. So that was saying precisely the right thing at precisely the right moment. So being spiritually prepared, it's not about filling your dance card. It's not about filling ice cube trays with sponsees. It's about being prepared for God to work through me in any situation that I'm in. It's quality, not quantity. It's intensity, not extensivity. On the other hand, I think there are things you can do. There's a passage on page 58 of the Big Book, which I think is immensely underrated in its importance. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. Now, readiness is not something you can conjure on its own. It is a function of wanting and willing. And it's so interesting if you have, it's not if you want what we have, if you have decided you want what we have. So I went through a period in AA before I had the last drink where I was in the decision-making period about whether I wanted to be a member of AA, but did I want what the people who did the program had? Uncertain. During the decision-making process, multiple options are on the table. And then as soon as you make a decision, just like when you make a decision to go on holiday, or when you make a decision to marry someone, or when you make a decision in favour of a particular job offer, in making the decision, the other options are now off the table. And the thing that makes it a decision is it's irreversible unless you go through another genuine decision-making process. If it's gone back on lightly, I'm sure you've done it yourself. I've done it as a sponsee, but I've also seen sponsees do it. When someone seems like super excited about doing the program, like, I'm going to be the best pupil in the world, I'm always very sceptical of that kind of overtly expressed enthusiasm, because it almost always within 2 weeks turns into complete disappearance. The people I trust as sponsees are the ones that say, I really fucking hate this, but I'm going to do it. And I kind of want to do it, but I sort of kind of don't, but here's the work. It's much more convincing. Resolutions tend to be very emotionally driven. Decisions are cold. When I finally decided to give in AA, it was a cold, hard decision, and it didn't get gone back on. That's syntactically well formed, remarkably. But and I kind of got quieter for a while because I just got on with it. But this very ostentatious, look at me working the program, means that in 2 weeks they won't be. Because it's emotionally driven, it's not driven by a decision, which is why when the emotion changes, the work stops. And that's how you can tell it wasn't a decision, it was emotion. Now, if I've decided I want what the program offers, the decision-making period is over. There is only one option on the table. I've decided this is what I want. This is what I'm going to plump for. Forget everything else. And I'm willing to do what is required, which means to do things which A, require effort, and B, are probably going to be painful. So willingness means being prepared to make an effort, which means foregoing other things I would rather do, doing things which are difficult, confusing, challenging, and suffering while I'm doing it. So it's a bit of a tall order. I can see why they say, what an order. Or, what? An order? But if I've got the desire, the wanting, and if I've got the willing, ready is automatic. Now, when I'm not being asked to sponsor, I might think I'm ready. Other people clearly don't, or it would be happening in the formal sense of sponsorship. So that's when I've gone through those phases of no one's asking me. It is about me, because people could be asking me, but they're not. And especially if I'm putting myself about, as it were. Every single time when I think I'm ready and think I'm willing, inside there's a psychological resistance. I don't want it. I might grudgingly concede the necessity of it. But there is something, people kind of know. They know what's going on. They know whether you want to sponsor or whether it's just a sort of technicality, a box that you're ticking. There is something there. But the great thing is one doesn't need to do a sort of self-analysis of any sort. Simply saying to God, show me the things I can't see. And then God will do for me what I can't do for myself, and I'll be shown a way. But in the meantime, God will give me lots of opportunities to be useful in ways that God sees fit. Some people are designed to sponsor 1 billion people. Other people are designed to be of service in lots of other ways. And I think there's room for everything, because the message can be carried in lots of different ways. How does doing step 12, what does doing step 12 look like before finishing step 9? That's the last question, so if there are any, I don't know if there are any more around the room. When I was very, very new in AA, I was told you need to start helping other people straight away. You don't need to be well. You don't need to get well first. A line that my sponsor has used, which is brilliant, is God draws straight lines with broken pencils. So I can be used as someone who is profoundly flawed to help people. I don't need to be super good or well. I need to be available to God to be helpful. Does that make sense? Any more questions? And we'll be finishing in about 5 minutes. Thanks. Oh, I like this one. Struggling to find a morning step 11 practice that sticks. The channel gets clogged quickly. I forget God. I forget to reset. How do I get locked in for the day first thing in the morning? There's a lot in there. I think there are two parts to that. There's the notion of a morning step 11 practice. I know people that say, I've used the same meditation books for the last 30 years. Like literally, they use the same ones. I need to switch it up the whole time. I would love my recovery to be so taped down I just do the same thing the whole time. I can't. I'm in a different state. I need to be shown by God on a daily basis what prayers to pray, what books to read. Sometimes I need 2 hours. Sometimes I need 5 minutes and then just get on with the day. If I'm guided by God, that is the answer to that. The thing about maintaining the conscious contact through the day, Bob Olson is very good on this. He says, you trust that if you've asked God to direct your thinking, God's going to respond to that in a way that you might not see. It might be entirely invisible to you. So God might be directing your thinking, but you might be unaware of it. So it's not like the whole day you're going to hear the booming voice from Mount Sinai saying, "Hi, this is God. Here's another thing for you." Just your instinct is improved the whole day. Dom Hubert van Zeller talks about this as well. If you spend the time, my step 11 is horrible, but I spend the time, and then the rest of the day is better for it than when I don't do it. I can't necessarily, it's not about feeling. It can feel awful. And you read people that write about prayer, Dom Hubert van Zeller, Teresa of Avila, St. John of the Cross, they had a really hard time with prayer because it's hard. It's not supposed to be cosy and lovely and nice. If it doesn't feel cosy and lovely and nice, doesn't mean you're not doing it right. Doesn't mean it isn't working, because God is on the other side and God will fill in the gaps where I'm getting it wrong. Does that make sense? Last two questions. Can I catch Al-Anonism by being in AA? I think you can. If you are now, most people who join AA by virtue of being an alcoholic have been in a family with untreated Al-Anons, and often it will go back generations. So the Al-Anonism can be, as it were, dormant or latent below the fulminant alcoholism. You start to deal with the alcoholism, you become much more competent, interested in the world around you, wanting things to be nice and good and sorted out. And then you see these messes everywhere and you think, I need to clear this room up and all the people in it. I think it's less that you catch it and more that a latent capacity for Al-Anonism develops. And honestly, it develops in most people. I see it. Some people seem inoculated against it and just perfectly boundaried from day one. Really rare. If I'm obsessively concerned with fellow AA's well-being and I think about them a lot and it hurts me and upsets me, what should I do? As ever, the key is the word "it." I think about them a lot and it hurts and upsets me. You see, the it that is hurtful and upsetting is the thinking, not the other people's well-being. So my problem there is the fact that I'm thinking about other people. And two things. First one is the Bob Newhart sketch on YouTube. Stop it. Just go and look at that afterwards. Bob Newhart, stop it. The only way to stop something is to stop it. If I've got a problem thinking about something, I just need to stop thinking about it. But the other thing is, there's a wonderful Al-Anon saying, let it break around you. Another one, let it begin with me. And now I'm not sure she was in Al-Anon, but some of us suspect she might have been. The poet Mary Oliver. I would read a lot of Mary Oliver. I think she provides a lot of the way out, entirely in line with Al-Anon principles. If you read her poetry, there is a lot of nature in there. She gets involved in nature. She finds it amazing. And she also talks about saving the only life you can save, which is your own. And even though people's wailing and crying for you to fix them just goes through to the bone, you've got to go on your own journey. And I think that's the wonderful, wonderful thing about Al-Anon, is the ability to be satisfied just with having an ordinary day of go to work and make the dinner and just be quiet and not have to get involved in any of the things going on around me. Just let the whirling dervishes whirl, because they're going to. And if I try to get in there, I'll get my arms and legs yanked off. So best to just sit quietly. And without Al-Anon, I wouldn't be able to continue to do AA. So I'm going to stop at that point, but let's thank you for the questions. Thank you for being here, because I'd have felt like a right nana sitting at the front just talking to some empty chairs. So thank you for being there. would you please join me? Should we do a circle and join in the Serenity Prayer? It won't come on, it won't kill us. Human touch, repulsive. Okay. Very good. So let's attempt the Serenity Prayer. God,
grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Voila. Voila.